What happens when a convicted sex offender doesn't just buy silence, but buys influence right inside the halls of Congress and the boardrooms of Wall Street?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are really getting into the recent disclosures around Jeffrey Epstein. And not just the headlines, but the actual proof of how he influenced powerful people in both politics and finance.
We've got a whole stack of sources here: congressional reports, private text messages, deep financial analyses. And our mission today is pretty clear: cut through all the noise and really analyze how he manipulated political proceedings and used major banks to enable his crimes for decades.
Right. And this deep dive really shows it isn't just about a few bad actors. It's a systemic failure. Right at the top, we're looking at specific documented evidence of how elites actively gave him cover.
And the scale of it is just, it's shocking.
It is. It spans nearly 2 decades.
Okay, to give you a sense of what we're dealing with, let's just start with a few key facts. First, the political angle. We now have text messages that show a sitting Democratic delegate from the U.S. Virgin Islands was asking Epstein for advice during a live House Oversight Committee hearing.
A hearing with Michael Cohen, no less. So we're talking about real-time coaching from a convicted criminal during an official proceeding.
Exactly. And that failure is completely mirrored on Wall Street. Take JPMorgan Chase. While Epstein was alive, the bank flagged, about $4.3 million in suspicious activity?
Just $4.3 million.
Okay.
But after his death, they go back and retroactively report nearly $1.3 billion.
A billion. An amount almost 300 times larger. I mean, that suggests more than just an oversight.
It implies a willful blindness, if not an outright institutional cover-up.
And here's the really crucial part right up front. None of this information came out on its own. It only happened because Congress was forced to pass a law demanding the disclosure, and that was after months of resistance. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that political influence.
Yeah, let's start there.
This is where it gets incredibly specific. We're focusing on Democratic delegate Stacey Plaskett. She represents the U.S. Virgin Islands. And the sources confirm she was texting with Epstein during that huge February 27, 2019 House hearing with Michael Cohen.
And it's not just casual texting. The reports are clear that Epstein was actively feeding her information. He was suggesting specific questions for her to ask Cohen.
So he's essentially acting as a legislative aide from the outside.
A very compromised legislative aide, yes. He's providing real-time input on how a congresswoman should be conducting official business.
And her questioning, it was so specific, it links right back to that coaching. She asked Cohen about Alan Weisselberg, the Trump Organization's CFO, and then she specifically brought up Miss Rona.
Right, and Cohen confirmed Miss Rona was Rona Graff, Trump's executive assistant for years. Her office was right next to his. Cohen even said she was, quote, involved in a lot that went on.
Just think about what that means. You have Epstein, a convicted predator, apparently using a member of Congress to dig for information on a political rival's inner circle.
And after she finishes her questioning, the text from Epstein to her is just 2 words. Good work.
Good work. It's chilling to read.
Now, for her part, Plaskett denied seeking his advice. She said he was a constituent who reached out and that she didn't know about his sex trafficking conviction when she accepted his input. But the optics, based on the documents, are staggering.
They are. And we also know there was a financial link. She accepted over $8,000 in campaign donations from him in 2016 and 2018.
So it just raises this fundamental question, right? What does it mean for our political system when a known predator can give real-time, targeted input to an elected official during a major congressional investigation?
And it led to a real fight in Congress. Republicans pushed to formally censure Plaskett. Their argument was that anyone taking input from someone like Epstein shouldn't be on sensitive committees like the Intelligence Committee.
But that effort failed. It did, but just barely. The vote was 213 to 214. It fell almost completely along party lines.
Yeah, one vote.
One vote. And the fact that it was that close but still failed, it sort of signals that for many, party loyalty was maybe more important than the implications of what actually happened.
Yeah. It proves Epstein's reach wasn't just about knowing powerful people, it was about directing them right inside the Capitol.
Exactly.
Okay, so if the Capitol shows us a political failure, let's pivot to Wall Street, which reveals a massive institutional one. Let's talk about JPMorgan Chase, JPMC.
The Senate Finance Committee's findings here are pretty damning. They called it an egregious series of compliance failures that went on for nearly 2 decades.
And this really gets to how he was able to keep his operation running for so long, as you said in the intro, that gap between the 4.3 million they first flagged and the 1.3 billion they reported later.
It's not a rounding error. It strongly suggests the bank chose to look the other way for years.
That $1.3 billion, that's the pipeline. That's the money that fueled his entire network. And the analysis shows this wasn't just, some mistake at a lower level.
No, this goes right to the top.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is the level of executive action. It wasn't passive. The analysis found that JPMC executives actively dismissed the concerns from their own compliance officers.
Wait, okay, there's a detail in here that is just mind-blowing. The former CEO of JPMC's private banking division, a guy named John Duffy, he actually coached Epstein on how to handle suspicious withdrawals.
Yes, he literally instructed Epstein on how to pull out large amounts of cash in a way that was designed to avoid setting off red flags and mandatory federal reporting requirements.
So he's teaching you how to circumvent the law.
Precisely. And we have emails showing private bankers were hiding information about Epstein's activities from their own compliance department. This isn't neglect anymore. This is enabling. It's actively participating.
So why? Why would a huge bank risk everything for one client? What kind of leverage did this guy have?
He was a protected asset. Simple as that. We learned Epstein was one of JPMC's single largest clients. He was in an elite group the bank called the Wall of Cash.
But it was more than just his own money, right?
Oh, yeah. He was a door opener. Even after JPMC officially cut ties with him as a client, their executives kept meeting with him. They maintained the relationship because of his influence over other billionaires, specifically Leon Black. Epstein was leverage.
And if you follow the money out of those accounts.
The specifics are damning. He paid Ghislaine Maxwell at least $25 million from his JPMC accounts. That includes one single payment of $19 million.
$19 million in one go. So you have a political system that's compromised and a financial system where executives are actively helping a criminal break the law. That's the shield he operated behind.
A very powerful shield for a very long time.
And the only reason we even know these specifics is because of a huge political battle to get them released. So let's shift to the politics of the disclosure itself.
Right, this whole thing culminated in the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And the key here was something called a discharge petition, which is a pretty rare legislative tool.
For anyone who doesn't know, a discharge petition is basically how Congress can bypass its own leadership to force a vote on a bill. You need a majority of the House 218 members to sign on.
And they got it. Republican Representative Thomas Massie really drove it, and he got the 218 signatures, a few Republicans and a huge number of Democrats. That forced the bill to the floor.
And it passed overwhelmingly, 427-1 in the House and unanimous in the Senate. That legally forced the DOJ to release these files.
But getting there was not a straight line. The Trump administration's position on this changed dramatically. At first, they promised transparency, but then, by July of 2025, Attorney General Pam Bondi comes out and says the DOJ reviewed everything and found no incriminating client list.
Basically saying there's nothing to see here.
Exactly. But then, that fall, the story completely flips. As pressure was building in Congress, President Trump suddenly reverses course. He orders the DOJ to investigate Epstein's ties to banks and prominent Democrats. He specifically named Bill Clinton, Lawrence Summers, Reid Hoffman.
And he framed it as, what was the quote?
Another Russia scam with all arrows pointing to the Democrats.
So this sudden partisan spin made the very people who wanted the files released suspicious.
Of course. Republican representatives themselves started warning that these new investigations might just be a big smokescreen, a way for the DOJ to withhold the documents by claiming it's part of an active investigation.
A classic bureaucratic delay tactic.
Yet, and that resistance has a price tag. We know the FBI spent over $851,000 just on overtime for what they called the Special Redaction Project.
Almost $1 million to black out names and details from travel logs, notes, and photos. I mean, that number alone tells you how politically sensitive this information is and how hard the government was working to filter it.
Right. And the fight now is to make sure that redaction process isn't just used as a political tool to hide the truth.
So what does this all mean for you? Trying to make sense of this. The sum of all these disclosures confirms that Jeffrey Epstein's real power wasn't just his money, it was leverage. He compromised politicians in Congress and executives at our biggest banks. His influence was woven into the system.
Yeah, the central theme here is that these elite circles, financial, political, They created a protected space for a known criminal to operate with impunity. This wasn't a failure of the system to find him. It was a success of the system in enabling him for decades.
We now know the government spent over $851,000 of your money just on FBI overtime to redact these files. The final documents are supposed to drop around December 19th. As that happens, ask yourself this. Given the proven influence Epstein had over politicians and bankers, who else in the halls of power might have been part of his network? And whose names is the government still working the hardest to conceal right now? The fight for real transparency is just getting started.